What's going on here is mind-blowing. Never in my lifetime have we had to change our behavior and have this drastic effect on the economy in order to save lives. Well, this is a terrible pandemic because it spreads human to human in a respiratory way. You can infect somebody when you're still fairly healthy. And there are many things like Ebola that aren't like that. You're flat on your back before you become significantly infectious. So this is kind of the nightmare scenario that in 2015, I gave a Shattuck lecture. I wrote an article for the New England Journal of Medicine and talked about how we needed to invest in new platforms so that we could quickly make diagnostics, make drugs, and make vaccines to stop an epidemic before it got to large numbers. Well, the good news is that China did their shutdown, and they did it in a very serious way. And after a 6-week period of a shutdown that's more extreme than even the best states in the United States are likely to do, they were able to start opening up again. And the total number of cases there is very, very small. So that's very good news. And as people are developing models, they look at that Chinese data, they look at how the South Korean numbers have gotten under control. So we're entering into a tough period that if we do it right, we'll only have to do it once for 6 to 10 weeks. But we have to do it, it has to be the whole country. We have to raise the level of testing and the prioritization of that testing quite dramatically in order to make sure we go through one shutdown so that we take the medical problem and really stop it before there's a large number of deaths. We do then get an economic problem, which is why you want to minimize the amount of time, and having states go at different things or thinking you can do it county by county, that will not work. The cases will be exponentially growing anywhere you don't have a serious shutdown. Well, let's say you have 100 cases, and let's say you don't do a shutdown, then it grows 33% per day. So if you take 100, you get 1,000, you get 10,000. It's exponential growth. If you're not stopping it, the sooner you engage in the shutdown, the easier it is to get to that peak. We have not peaked. The parts of the country that aren't shut down, in late April, we should start to see the numbers peak there. They'll still be too high to open up. So you'll probably have to go another month to really get those numbers down. But any part of the country that has cases, and truthfully, because of our problems with testing, because we're not prioritizing testing the right way, that a lot of those places actually do have cases. But even if they have the 100, that will grow, and people do cross county boundaries. And so basically the whole country needs to do what was done in the part of China where they had these infections. It's very likely that rich countries who uniformly throughout their country do a serious shutdown, that they will be able to avoid a high percentage of their population getting infected. That's what the exemplars, like some of the work in China and South Korea, are telling us. Now, as you get to poorer countries, the difficulty of doing the isolation, where you live close by in slums, where you have to go out every day to get your food, it is going to be much, much tougher. And so, by summer, I think the rich countries that have been competently led on this will not have to go back into shutdown. And, from the disease point of view, they'll avoid very large numbers of deaths. And so in that phase, we still will have a challenge with the developing countries. I mean, we wish that we'd shut down even sooner in places like New York. Then you would have not had the medical overload that is such a huge challenge for them. Unless you're going to partition the country, the whole country has to be in this together. And we're not, I don't see us making people not cross county lines or something like that. So it really is how many cases are in the country, and have we adopted in terms of testing, testing prioritization, contact tracing, the right things. But the good news is we're seeing that countries that pay that price, which is a gigantic price, then the percentage of Chinese that are infected is like 0.01%. And so now, stores are open there and closed in the rest of the world. That's, I'm not sure you call it good news, but I totally agree with what Dr. Fauci said. He's been a very positive voice about the numbers driving this, and those numbers are very uncertain because of the still the disorganization of the testing capacity and where it's directed. Until we get the number of cases in the country down to small numbers where we can be doing testing and isolation against those small numbers, we need to make this our top priority. And it is super painful to drive this very high degree of social isolation I call shutdown. The middle course really isn't there, because it's hard to say, oh, go back to the theater for a week, maybe or maybe not you'll be infected or infecting people. Until we get the certainty we've hit these low numbers, I doubt, even if you told people that they should be buying new houses and cars and, hanging out in restaurants, I doubt they're going to want to do that. People want to protect older people, they want to protect their parents. And so the sooner we take this medicine, which is tough medicine, the sooner we'll be out of it and not have to go back into it again. No, it's not realistic. The numbers are still going up. That only happens after the numbers have peaked and are going down a lot and getting down to an absolute level. There are some good things happening. The work on a vaccine, although that probably will take 18 months, that's going full speed ahead. Our foundation is funding that. We're looking at getting vaccines to everyone in the world. So in the long run, that is the key thing. We had a really positive result that people were wondering, did you have to have a medical person swab you in this way that they stuck it deep in your nose? We were able to prove, which on Monday the FDA made official, that if you do a self-test where you don't have to have the medical worker with personal protection equipment, that self-test is as accurate as the one where the medical worker gives it. So that means that by self-swabbing, we'll be able to get a lot more tests done and only be limited by the PCR back-end capacity. So there's good news coming. One of the therapeutics, although none of them are proven out, but there are quite a few. We have a things the foundation created called the Therapeutics Accelerator to really look at thousands of compounds and make sure we focus the human trials on the ones that have the most promise. So, innovation, some of which we could have done in advance, but innovation really is happening. But, when you look at those numbers, the U.S., now with the most cases, there is no state that has gotten to the point where their numbers are flat and are going down. And the testing capacity means we're quite blind to a lot of these cases right now. So it can be done, but we're not, the light is not at the end of the tunnel in terms of a mid-April reopening. Well, there's some uncertainty about this, but my view has been that through May, unfortunately, the schools will not, are not likely to come back for this year, this school year. And, that's about the range, late May, early June, that we'll probably have to be like this. I'm learning how to do digital meetings. I happen to use a thing called Teams for Microsoft, but it's a very different lifestyle, and it's very jarring. It's a scary time. Every morning you get up, you see that number has increased. So, learning to cope we're completely in uncharted territory. But the scientists that our foundation gets to fund and work with, they are doing a great job, and the health workers are doing heroic work. So I do see, it coming to an end, and if we do it properly, we'll only be shut down in the U.S. for that one period of time. What's going on here is mind-blowing. Never in my lifetime have we had to change our behavior and have this drastic effect on the economy in order to save lives. And, there are people who wish we didn't have to do that. That is fully understandable. This is some very tough medicine, but it's better to take the economic problem where the economy can come back than to allow it to spread throughout the country and take millions of deaths as the price that we have to pay here. And so, I think this is a smack on the head. This will cost trillions of dollars. They just passed a $2 trillion relief bill, and now they're talking about more. The kind of research to be ready for the next pandemic is a tens of billions number. So it'll look almost trivial compared to the price we're paying now. And that price would have been a lot lower if the world was more prepared. Yeah, the companies like Moderna, CureVac, and Ovio, our foundation has been funding them to build vaccines in a somewhat different way. It's an RNA platform that is very versatile. So the amount you have to change is very small, and you can build up your manufacturing so that it is available no matter what pathogen comes along. That manufacturing capacity is there, and certain elements of how you go through regulatory approval, because you're only changing one small piece. You will have had many of these RNA vaccines approved. People understand the safety profiles. So that would mean that in the future, yes, that timeline is less. Because you want things to be safe, and vaccines actually can, in weird cases, do an enhancement of the disease. You really need to test for that. And so I don't think we'll get much below a year. We'll challenge very smart people to work on that. But the trade-off involved there is about the how confident are you that when you're going out and giving this, that there's no side effects. That's right. You'll see a lot of people try to show that viruses, their infectivity and how much they kill, the case fatality rate, those are separate things. And so smallpox is a very bad case because it's very infective and it kills like 30%. Here, fortunately, although there's still some uncertainty, the case fatality rate is something like 1%. If you have a medical system that's able to take care of the severe cases, about 1% of those who are infected die. And yes, it could be worse. This is very, very bad, but still not the worst case. Well, having these markets where you have, bats in a cage and pangolins and things like that, it's fairly clear that the less we have of those, that somewhat reduces the chance, but it won't reduce it to zero. And so you really do need the preparedness system there. And there are so many coronaviruses in animals, it would not have been possible to say, okay, this is the one to be afraid of. We don't understand enough about that, how it transforms to cross the species barrier. There are literally millions of viruses out in animals. The number that cross over, like the flu does, is not very large, but that's not very easy to predict. There are people who've looked at that, maybe someday, but that's outside of our ability. And so we have to have the tools when it does cross over to see, wow, if you're seeing human-to-human transmission, particularly respiratory transmission, then the world has to go on red alert. And parts of the world went on red alert in January, and parts did not. Well, it's a very challenging time, and we're all having to make huge changes to our lives that we never would have expected. People are rising to the challenge, figuring out how to be at their home and reduce their contacts. That's really fantastic. People are figuring out how to volunteer, many cases through virtual connections, tutoring and mentoring. People are giving money to philanthropies in the local areas that are stepping up to find, where people may not have shelter or food, and that's really fantastic. I'm an optimist. We'll be driven by the numbers, but from what we've seen in other countries, if we do this well and nationwide, these numbers will start to come down. And so there'll be a point, hopefully in 10 weeks or less, where we can start going back to normal. That's a long time, though. It's a wild amount of time, and there will be this temptation to let off. Unfortunately, that will just mean that it lasts longer, or that we have to go back and do that again. So, there's no need to panic, even though the change is a bit scary.